If you still think dress watches are only for suits, weddings, and the occasional formal dinner, I think you're leaving a lot on the table. Because the truth is, dress watches are a lot more versatile than most collectors give them credit for. Outside of real water-resistant situations, they might be some of the easiest watches to wear day in and day out. The problem is most people never really try. They assume a dress watch will feel too delicate, too formal, or just awkward with casual clothes. I don't buy that. So today, we're looking at some of the best dress watches from major brands. And stick with me until the end, because the final watch in this video might be one of the most complete expressions of the dress watch anywhere in modern watchmaking. A piece with insane astronomical precision, legendary finishing, and a layout that somehow does everything without feeling crowded. Before we get into the picks, let's set the rules. To make this list, a watch has to do more than just look elegant. It has to come from a brand that genuinely knows how to make a great dress watch. It has to feel like a real choice someone would actually buy from that brand. It can't just be the most expensive thing in the catalog, and it needs to bring something real to the table. Design, heritage, movement quality, finishing, value, or some combination of all of them. So no micro brands, no independents, and no brands where dress watches feel more like a side project than a real strength. This is about established names and the pieces that best represent what they do well in this category. And as always, this is my take. So if there's a pick you'd argue with, throw it in the comments. Let's start with a brand that most people still think of as sports first. Pick 1. Tudor 1926. Luna Tudor is still a little top-heavy with sports watches in the public imagination. That's where most of the hype lives, but their dress pieces are better than they get credit for, and they're also more attainable than many people realize. The best example to me is the 1926 Luna. The broader 1926 collection already sits in a nice sweet spot between about $2,000 and $3,000, and the Luna adds something genuinely interesting with the moon phase complication. This is still very much a dress watch, but it keeps some of the practical upside of the standard 1926, including 100 meters of water resistance. That alone makes it easier to live with than a lot of dress watches in this range. The 39 by 47 millimeter case wears well, and at just over 10 millimeters thick, it still stays nicely within dress watch territory. Full polishing keeps it elegant, while the 7-link bracelet gives it a comfortable, almost everyday feel. And I really like that Tudor kept a solid case back here. It leaves room for engraving, which sounds small until you realize how few brands still make that easy. Inside is a Sellita-based caliber, the T6079, running at 4 Hz. It's a practical movement choice that helps keep the watch approachable. You also get 3 strong dial options: black and gold, blue and silver, and a more fashion-forward champagne dial with black furniture. And right now, it's a pretty unique moon phase within the broader Tudor and Rolex world. So Tudor gives you a dress watch with real daily usability. But if pure value is what you care about most, the next watch might be the best bargain in the whole lineup. Pick 2. Tissot Heritage 1938. Tissot has a lot of watches that punch above their price, but for dress, I'd give it to the Heritage 1938. When it came out in 2023, it got a little buried under all the PRX noise. But over time, people have started to realize just how good this watch actually is. At around $900, it's one of the most accessible COSC certified Swiss chronometers you can buy from a major brand. And that immediately gives it a level of seriousness you don't often get at this price. But what makes it work is that it doesn't feel sterile. It still has warmth and personality. The styling pulls from sporty Tissot pieces of the 1930s, and the 3 dial options are all strong. Anthracite with gilt accents, the salmon dial that a lot of enthusiasts gravitate toward, and the blue on silver version that also comes with a mesh bracelet. Inside is Tissot's chronometer-grade take on the ETA 28242. regulated to COSC standards at -4 to +6 seconds a day. You only get 50 meters of water resistance, so this is not pretending to be a swim watch, but as a daily dress piece, it absolutely works. That's the appeal here. Real chronometer credentials, good looks, and enough versatility to feel just as at home on a weekend as it does in a more formal setting. Now from Swiss value, let's jump to Seiko, because this next one proves you don't need to spend much to get a genuinely charming dress watch. Pick 3. Seiko Cocktail Time 38.5. If we're talking standard Seiko, one of the best mid-size dress options they make is the 38.5mm Cocktail Time family. I'm choosing it over the 40.5mm versions because I think this size just fits the category better, and the dials are still the main event either way. That's really why people love these. The textures and colors look far more expensive than the price suggests, and the cocktail inspiration somehow works without feeling cheesy. The Negroni and Mojito-inspired dials in particular have real personality. You get strong finishing on the hands and indices, the reliable 4R35 movement, and 50 meters of water resistance. For an automatic dress watch under $500, it's still incredibly hard to beat. And the 38.5mm versions have a slightly different dial texture from the larger models. More of a woven, rose engine-inspired surface, which gives them even more character. This is just a great reminder of how much visual payoff Seiko can deliver at entry-level money. But now, we're leaving entry-level value behind and moving into a watch that feels much more technically ambitious without giving up daily practicality. Pick 4. Omega Constellation Globemaster Annual Calendar. I'm a huge believer in the Omega Globemaster. I own one. I've talked about the broader Constellation family many times, and if I'm choosing an Omega dress watch for men, this is probably the one. The design traces back to the famous Pai-Pan constellations of the 1950s, and while the three-hand versions are great, I wanted to include the annual calendar because it offers so much at its price point. This is a genuinely substantial complication from a mainstream luxury brand, but it's still positioned in a way that makes sense. The Globemaster was the world's first master chronometer in 2015, and the annual calendar followed in 2016. Inside is the coaxial caliber 8922 Meta S certified, with the annual calendar only needing correction once a year after February. That gives you a lot of the appeal of a high-end calendar watch without stepping all the way into perpetual calendar money. You also get 55 hours of reserve from twin barrels, a 41mm case, and one of my favorite details in the whole category, the tungsten carbide fluted bezel. That's such a clever Omega move. You still get the luxury look and light play of a fluted bezel, but with a hardness level that makes it far less precious in daily wear. Add 100 meters of water resistance, anti-magnetic chops, and all the benefits of the master chronometer standard, and this becomes a very easy dress watch to actually live with. Now, if Omega gives you technical confidence, the next watch goes in the opposite direction. Quieter, softer, and much more poetic. Mid to high-end, pick 5. Grand Seiko Omiwatari SBGY007. Grand Seiko is a tricky brand here because a lot of their most famous watches live in that dressy everyday space rather than in pure dress territory. So for this list, I wanted something more distilled, more clearly dress in its intent. That brings me to the Omiwatari, the SBGY007. At around $9,000, it sits in a meaningful place for the brand, but more importantly, it shows a softer, more restrained side of Grand Seiko. Instead of all the sharp facets and dramatic surface changes, you get a more rounded, flatter, more pebbled case. It still feels refined, but in a quieter way. At 10.2 millimeters thick and 43.7 millimeters lug to lug, it also wears very elegantly. Inside is the manual wind 9R31 spring drive with 72 hours of reserve, and crucially, the power reserve indicator is moved to the back. That decision alone made a lot of collectors happy. The manual wind setup suits the watch perfectly, and the dial, inspired by the frozen surface of Lake Suwa, is one of the most beautiful textures Grand Seiko makes. If Grand Seiko is the contemplative pick, Pick 6. Rolex 1908. Rolex is surprisingly difficult in this category because so many Rolex watches that feel dressy also happen to be excellent everyday watches. A Datejust or a day date can live on your wrist full-time without much trouble. So for this list, I wanted something more intentionally elegant. That's where the 1908 comes in. It replaced the Cellini in 2023 and feels like Rolex finally leaning more decisively into the dress category. You still get the Rolex way of doing things: clean, robust, highly controlled, but in a watch that fits much more naturally into this kind of conversation. It gets 50 meters of water resistance, comes in yellow gold, white gold, or platinum, and uses the superlative chronometer-certified caliber 7140 with the Siloxy silicone hairspring. But for me, the big turning point was the Setimo bracelet. I liked the 1908 on strap. I loved it on that bracelet. The 7-link design transforms the watch, especially in yellow gold. It gives the piece that very Rolex ability to sit somewhere between formal elegance and everyday wearability. The domed crystals, the enamel small seconds, the applied markers, the Breguet-style hour hand, all of that is strong, but the bracelet is what makes the watch click. From Rolex, we move to the watch that may be the single most important dress watch silhouette ever made. Pick 7. Cartier Tank Louis Cartier. At some point, every dress watch discussion has to stop and acknowledge the Cartier Tank. It was conceived in 1917, inspired by the Renault FT-17 tank, and it is one of the most influential watch designs ever made. The tank didn't just become a dress icon, it helped define what elegance on the wrist even looked like. One of the purest modern expressions of that idea is the Tank Louis Cartier in large, which, by Cartier standards, is still very restrained at 38.1 by 27.8 millimeters. You get everything you want from a tank: the silver grain dial, Roman numerals, railway minute track, blued sword hands, and the hidden Cartier signature. Then there's the yellow gold case, the sapphire cabochon crown, and the alligator strap. It's just one of those designs that seems completely immune to time. Some watches age well. The tank barely seems to age at all. But if Cartier represents timeless purity, the next watch goes in a much stranger and more charismatic direction. Pick 8. Vacheron Constantin Historiques American 1921. Some people would say the patrimony is the answer for Vacheron. I wouldn't. For me, it's the Historiques American 1921, and it's not close. This watch is just too distinctive to ignore. The dial is rotated clockwise by 45 degrees, which immediately gives it an identity almost nothing else has. The original design goes back to the 1920s, and when Vacheron brought it back into production, they wisely kept the oddness that makes it so great. You can get it in white or pink gold, in either 40 millimeters or a smaller 36.5 millimeter size. Inside is the manual wind caliber 4400 with a 65-hour reserve and the Geneva seal. It's unusual but never feels forced. It feels like a real design object with genuine history behind it. And now we're entering the final stretch, the part of the list where the finishing gets crazier, the ideas get bolder, and the payoff at the end really starts coming into view. Final stretch, pick 9. Jaeger LeCoultre Reverso Tribute Monoface, small seconds. This was one of my favorite recent JLC releases, full stop. The Reverso Tribute Monoface small seconds in pink gold on that Milanese bracelet is just stunning. The grained dial, small seconds, gold hands, and applied markers all work together beautifully. But the bracelet is what really takes it to another level. It's hand-woven by a single artisan using more than 16 meters of gold wire, and it drapes more like fabric than metal. The case is just 7.56 millimeters thick. The back is solid gold and engravable, and inside is the hand wound caliber 822 at only 2.93 millimeters thick. The Reverso may have started life as a sports watch, but at this point, it has fully earned its place among the great elegant classics. But if that watch is about transforming an icon, Pick 10. Blancpain Villeray Quantième Complet. Phases de Lune. If a complicated dress watch is high on your list, Blancpain deserves real attention. This Villeray complete calendar gives you a lot of the visual richness people want from a complicated dress watch, but without the cost leap of a perpetual calendar. And the clever part is how easy it is to live with. Instead of cluttering the case with obvious correctors, Blancpain hides the adjustment pushers under the lugs, and you can operate them without needing a separate tool. That's a genuinely elegant solution. On the dial, you get day and month apertures, Blancpain's moonphase face, and the date shown with a serpent hand. The 40mm case stays pretty compact for everything it offers. Inside, the 66544 uses 321 components, twin barrels, 72 hours of reserve, and a silicone balance spring. Now we're getting into the part of the list where dress watches stop feeling simple and start feeling deeply clever. Pick 11. Breguet Classique Subscription 2025. There are more complicated watches in Breguet's catalog, but few are as striking as the Classique Subscription 2025. This piece was made to celebrate the brand's 250th anniversary, and it's one of those watches that look simple until you realize how much thought is actually packed into it. It draws direct inspiration from the subscription pocket watches Abraham Louis Breguet produced in the late 18th century, and the dial is almost radically clean. White Grand Fio enamel, a secret signature, and a single flame-blued hand. That's it. The 40mm case is made in a proprietary Breguet gold alloy, and inside is the manually wound VS, built around a symmetrical architecture inspired by those original subscription watches. You also get a 96-hour reserve, anti-shock protection, and a Nivacron balance spring. So it's deeply historical, but not trapped in the past. And as striking as this watch is, it still isn't the final payoff. Bonus, A Lange and Sona Lange 1 Moonphase. This is the one I teased at the beginning. If there's a watch on this list that feels like the fully realized form of the modern dress watch, it might be the Lange 1 Moonphase. Lange is already revered for the sheer level of German watchmaking craft on display, but this watch adds one of the best moonphase executions anywhere in the industry. Inside is the manually wound caliber L 121.3, and the lunar display is accurate enough that it only needs correction by 1 day after 122.6 years. That's absurd on its own, but what really amazes me is that Lange fits all of this into a 38.5mm case without the dial ever feeling cluttered. You've got the time, outsized date, power reserve, moon phase, and running seconds, all in that unmistakable asymmetrical Lange 1 layout. And somehow, it still feels balanced. And then you turn it over and get everything you'd hope for from Lange. Hand engraving, striping, beveling, a swan neck regulator, gold chaitons, and heat-blued screws. It doesn't just feel like a great dress watch. It feels like a statement about what dress watchmaking can be when nothing important gets left out. So there you have it, some of the best dress watches from major brands, from accessible value plays like Tissot and Seiko, all the way up to the heavy hitters of high horology. And hopefully, if nothing else, this makes the case that dress watches are a lot more versatile than many people assume. If you enjoyed the video, give it a thumbs up, subscribe, and hit the bell. And I'm curious, which pick here surprised you the most, and which one would you have chosen instead? Drop it in the comments, especially if you own one of these pieces, because that kind of real-world perspective always helps other collectors.